So what is integrated deployment? So you may have, if you were at KNIME Summit or attended the KNIME Virtual Summit in the spring, have heard our CEO, Michael Berthold, talk about integrated deployment. So the idea here is that you can use a design workflow to automate creation of your production workflow. So you can see in the little picture on the right-hand side here, I'm actually taking portions of my workflow that are captured in between these little purple areas, and I'm setting those aside so that I can use them automatically in my production workflow later. So maybe I need to capture parts of my workflow that's going to do something for me, whatever custom data pre-processing I might need to do, or the portion of my workflow where I'm actually doing something like normalization and making predictions, or anything else that I may need that's in my original design workflow that I want to make sure gets replicated when it's time to go to production. I can capture those bits and pieces and then essentially sew them up automatically into a new production workflow that can then be automatically deployed and executed on KNIME Server. So I'll show you an example workflow with real nodes here in a second. But why would I need something like this? There's a lot of advantages to putting models into deployment in this way. So first one is that you can save time. If you're actually building the production workflow into the design workflow as you go, so to speak, then you're going to free up some of your data science resources and your model DevOps resources when you automate this whole process. Another nice feature here of integrated deployment is that you can reduce the error when you're moving. The way you may have done it before is manually move your models from the development and creation side to the deployed production side in some way, almost like copy pasting maybe. If we can get away from that method and move to something more automated, that's going to reduce errors and just reduce the possibility to introduce potential problems into that scenario. It also can make governance and compliance reporting easier a little bit with a new feature that I'll talk about here in a second. And also we can get into the idea of optimizing our models and optimizing the updating of models in particular that are in production. And that's what this diagram on the right-hand side here is trying to show you. If we have a case where we have models in production already and we're looking at their accuracy, and over time we start to see them drift, then maybe using automated deployment through integrated deployment, we can introduce new challenger models that maybe aren't drifting or have a better accuracy overall. We can compare our models and maybe we need to automatically move from the old one to the new one. Integrated deployment can help us do that too. So we talked about what it is, why you might want to use it. What does that actually look like? So here's an actual KNIME workflow that's using some new features here and is using the integrated deployment. So on the far left-hand side, we do some standard reading in some data from a database and blending it together with some flat files maybe. In this section in the middle, we're doing some data pre-processing, cleaning our data up. And then over here, we're training a model and taking the model that we build and using it to make some predictions. And what you'll notice if you're familiar with this process is there's some new nodes in here, and they're highlighted in these green circles. So these capture workflow start and capture workflow end nodes are new, and they do pretty much what they say they do. Anything between the start and end, for example, is captured as a piece and set aside for later use. So I'm capturing this entire data pre-processing section and then feeding it out to, down here at the end, a workflow combiner. I'm also capturing this section here where I'm making my random forest predictions using my new model, and I'm sending that to my workflow combiner and ultimately writing a workflow. So this is where the automation of the deployment workflow creation comes in, because once I run this, this is doing all of my model design process that I would normally do, but it's also going to now automatically create this new production workflow. And you can see that in the middle here, I have the exact steps that I did in the custom data pre-processing section from before for my design workflow, along with the same steps from the prediction. So whatever it is that I capture, I can combine into a new workflow and have this produced for me automatically. So that now what's happening in deployment is I'm reading row by row data, something I want to make a prediction on in JSON. It does the pre-processing. It uses my model to do a prediction and then spits that prediction out into JSON again. And I've built this workflow right automatically by using my preceding workflow. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do with this, more than we have time to get into in this intro. But we have some workflows on the hub, and you guys will get the slides here so you can actually click on these links and go to the things I'm pointing out. A few workflows on the hub to get you started with integrated deployment. There's also a couple of recent blog articles that use the integrated deployment functionality on guided machine learning and continuous deployment, and this is a blog series that we'll be adding to in the weeks and months to come. And then also, as I mentioned, Michael's presentation from Spring Summit, there's a good 45 minutes on this about all the different intricacies and the motivation behind why we wanted to get this implemented in KNIME. Okay, this is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. Another thing here is the idea of elastic deployment. So both executor groups and then reservation of executors. So if you have a KNIME server already, you're probably used to something along the lines of what you see in this graphic on the left-hand side. The KNIME server is going to contain this Tomcat web container. There's a bunch of workflows maybe that as a data scientist, I or other folks on my team have designed. And then I'm going to say to the web container, hey, I want to run my churn prediction workflow. So it goes out there and it grabs it from the workflow repository and it sends it to an executor somewhere. Maybe it's its own internal executor, or maybe I have other executors living out on-prem or in the cloud to be able to scale my computing needs. So this is something that we're allowing for with the new release, is supporting executors with these different types of configurations, which I'll show on the next slide. And then I'll talk about some different new ways that you might be able to deploy in a more flexible way. So one thing that you may run into, if you have different teams maybe in your organization that are using KNIME, maybe I have my marketing team here on the top, and my marketing guys, they don't necessarily need a lot of cores for the execution of their workflows, but it is very heavy on RAM for whatever reason. They need a lot of memory. That may differ from my engineering team here on the bottom, who has very heavy RAM usage, but instead of CPUs, they need GPUs for the type of processing that they're doing. And so what would be nice as an administrator is if I had a way to be able to match the workflows that different groups in my organization tend to run with particular executor capabilities. So I could focus an executor on, high memory, low cores, or GPU only, medium memory, right? I could make all of these different types of settings. I can partition these computing resources essentially by, department, for example, or by user. How are these different workflows being used? The KNIME server now is going to allow you to do that, essentially assign individual executors to meet these needs. We also can do cloud auto scaling now. You already have been able to run KNIME Analytics Platform, for example, in the cloud on a pay-as-you-go basis in AWS or Azure. And so what we're doing now is, and I should mention too, you also have the ability to run KNIME server in the cloud with a BYOL, a bring your own license kind of model. So this is going to support KNIME Server Large with multiple executors. And KNIME Server Large also has an embedded executor within it, a single one, so that it can be run standalone. The new feature here is that now you could have multiple executors running in the cloud that can be used by KNIME Server Large, with the idea that, if you need the extra compute, you can support, or using AWS's elastic scaling, you can support this new pay-as-you-go model, right? Just to make sure that if you have a really beefy workflow or something with a lot of data that on a short-term basis you need a lot of resources for, you can now easily scale up, scale down to handle that. It still supports the bring your own license model. That's going to use cores from your existing server license to be able to create these additional executors. So if this is something you're interested in doing, we have a couple of links down here at the bottom as to how this is supported on Amazon and Azure. The elastic scaling is on Amazon right now, and Azure is going to be coming in the future. And then just to kind of wrap this section up, getting at the idea of a hybrid approach and meeting some budgetary needs that you may have. So if you have, for example, a KNIME server on premise with a certain number of cores, maybe that meets your needs 95% of the time, and that's fine. You know, you've got licensed cores for these different executors, but then sometimes you just have a demand peak where you really do need some extra resources, but you just need them for a little while. Or maybe you have a need very occasionally for some specialty hardware. You want to make sure that you have some machines with GPUs available that you don't normally need. So what you could do is actually have a mix of these, your on-prem executors basically, along with scaling into the cloud for just additional resources or specialized resources. You can now do that together and have it be governed by KNIME Server. And so just as a way to, meet your budgeting needs, right? You need these resources very occasionally, only pay for them when you spin them up. When they're not needed anymore, then they're shut down and you're not paying for that extra stuff all the time. Okay, let's talk about another new feature, the metadata mapping with the workflow summary. So what is this? If you're used to looking at KNIME workflows already, then you already know that workflows in a way are kind of self-documenting, right? You look at your workflow, it's a visual representation. I can see that I read in some data, I did some processing, I built the model, I wrote out to a database. Whatever it is that you're doing, you can see it on the screen. But we were getting requests from our customers that they needed a way to summarize their workflows systematically using something other than just a picture of the workflow, right? So what we've done is this workflow summary summarizes your workflow using your choice of either XML or JSON, and it's going to contain a whole bunch of information in it. Information on your runtime environment, so what operating system did I run on, what extensions were used for this workflow, and what versions of those extensions, along with things like metadata and annotations to be able to document it properly. Probably the most important thing that folks have asked about is the nodes, right? So I get the sequence, which nodes are connected before and after other particular nodes, along with what their configuration is, what state the node is at a particular time. And then the summary also contains information on data that's read and written by the workflow. So there's a lot that's being recorded here. Why do I need something like this? Maybe you don't, maybe this isn't a pressing need for you, but there are some folks that really need this type of information. And the main driver behind it is some sort of external documentation for compliance reporting. So think of cases where you might be dealing with healthcare data or financial data. There's a lot of government regulations about how that data can be handled. Government may want to know where it's going, what you did with it, very detailed steps that you can't just represent by showing someone a picture of a workflow, right? So you might need it for that purpose. Something else you could use this information for is documentation of your process of creating workflows for internal use. So maybe you don't need to share it for compliance purposes, but maybe you might want to know over the course of 6 months, I started this workflow, it used to do X, Y, and Z, and now I know it does all of these other things, and I could see over time how the workflow itself has changed and its functionality has changed. So that'd be another reason you might want to have a summary like this. Apart from just having the JSON or XML itself, it now allows us to give you some workflows, which I'll talk about in a second, which enable interactive exploration and reporting of this information. And so that's what you see on the right-hand side here, an example of the interactive workflow explorer. So I can see at a glance, okay, I have a table of these different nodes. I can see their state, what type of node they are. I also can see predecessor and successor nodes. So I get an idea of how the nodes are connected together. I can see data that's being read in particular tables. All this sort of stuff is in there. This workflow, which is being run in the KNIME Webportal, allows me to drill down into that if I need to. Another nice feature is that this can help you automate the documentation process, right? So if I need to create a static report every month about the workflows that I've been running, what they contain, and so on, I could do that, right? And then hand that off to my boss or to a compliance agency or whoever needs to know that type of information. So that's why you might need it. How do you use it? It's actually pretty straightforward. First of all, you have to execute and save a workflow that you want to summarize, right? And then apart from that, there's a couple of ways to get at that information. So one is I can go into the analytics platform itself and go up to File, Export, Workflow Summary. That just brings up a little dialog for me where I'm going to, pick the file that I want to write to, basically select which of the two formats that I would like to write with. There's another optional checkbox here that will allow you to basically supply some, do I want some additional detailed information in my summary or not? Once you make those choices, then you've got your workflow summary. So I mentioned there are some workflows that we have out there already on the hub that will allow you to use this information in some existing ways. All three of these workflows use this Analyze Workflow Summary component, which is also up on the hub. So one of these workflows is going to collect summaries on your KNIME server. It's going to basically use the REST API to say, what workflows am I running? What's going on with each of those workflows? Generate a report for me for each of them. Another thing you could do is generate a static report. Again, maybe more for compliance purposes, where you say, I want to know which nodes exactly were run, which nodes were connected to other nodes, what data I used. I can spit that out in a static report. And then also the interactive workflow metadata exploration, which I showed a screenshot of in the preceding slide. That workflow actually looks like this guy down here. And if none of these three workflows exactly meet your needs or what you need to do, you can create your own workflow, especially using this component that's been provided. So definitely play around with this workflow summary. We'd be interested to see and hear from you some of the cool things that you could do with it. Okay, another thing I wanted to show you here is the new web portal. So we've done a refresh on the user interface for the web portal, which is our main interface for guided analytics. So in this process, we rewrote some of the widget nodes. We made it possible for you to more easily adjust the look and feel, right? So things like colors and fonts. There's some themes you can use now to get at that consistency a little bit more easily. If you don't like the new web portal, that's okay. It's still backwards compatible. You can use the old web portal. It's still there. It didn't go away if you want to. So, but just wanted to show you in a quick demo what some of these new features look like. So let me bring up a web portal here. So I'm got a little KNIME server stood up on AWS, and I've got a workflow listed out here under my username called the Guided Visualization Demo. So at a glance already, I've got these breadcrumbs, right? I can go back and forth in my directory structure up here at the top. And then I have this little card that tells me a few things. It tells me when this workflow was last edited. I can see that there's a little orange dot here with a 1 beside it. That means that I have one workflow job that's already currently running within or for this workflow. If there was a completed job, then I would have a little green dot here with a number by it as well. This little yellow arrow here, I could just start the new execution of a workflow if I wanted to, or I can drill in and I can actually see, okay, here's the existing job that I have. It was started by me this morning. What do I want to do? Maybe I want to copy a link to it. Maybe I'm fine with discarding it, but it's telling me that there's some interaction required. It's in some intermediate state. So if I want this to finish, I actually need to go in and start providing some additional input to it. And then I have some other options up here. If I want to run a new workflow, maybe I'd like to send myself an email when the workflow is completed. So I've got the dialog to do that. But let me just go ahead and click run to start a new job here. And this, you'll notice one of the really new nice features is the execution bar. So now I get a percentage and an elapsed time. That went by pretty quickly there. Before, if you're used to looking at the KNIME web portal, you would just kind of see the spinning wheel. And if it was one of those things where it was taking really long time, potentially, between one set of nodes and the next set of nodes in your workflow, you wouldn't always know how long that was going to take. Now we try and give you an idea about that. So I'll show you again, this workflow isn't doing much. It's basically just going to be giving me some suggested visualizations for some data that I give it. So I'm gonna upload some data here. You'll see this execution again. So I get a time elapsed, and then I also get the estimated percentage of completion. I can go into my workflow, make some selections about what it is that I'd like to potentially plot. It's going to think some more. And then I get some suggestions for visualization. So you get the idea of how this works. I didn't really so much want to show you what this workflow does, but rather wanted to show you the new look and feel for the interface with the breadcrumbs and the progress bar and all of that stuff. So if I go back, I can cycle back through the preceding steps in my workflow, or I can cancel and go back out to my job view. So at any rate, that's what that looks like. Be encouraged to hear your thoughts on this, any comments on the new look and feel, because we're always looking to improve this based on feedback from our customers. And then finally, just a couple of other things here. For the IT administrators, maybe among you who are tasked with setting up KNIME Server, we already had Active Directory and LDAP integrations. We've now included OAuth. So if you want to implement OAuth for single sign-on to KNIME Server, you can do that. Makes it easier for you as an administrator. It makes a pretty simple login for your users because they're used to seeing OAuth in several places, whether they realize it or not, probably. So that's just something that we've added there. And then a couple of things about this, things going on under the hood here. So we've replaced Apache Tommy with standard Tomcat now. So what that means practically is that connections to a KNIME server, EJB mount points are now deprecated, and we use REST instead. And the reason we did that is because it's more performant and it's more stable. And then the other thing we've done is replaced the messaging queue system. We've taken out RMI and replaced it with Apache Cupid for passing events. This is something that's bundled with the KNIME server. You don't need to do any setup for this. It's just when you install the new KNIME server, this is what's going to be used now, Cupid instead of RMI. And that's all that I had to tell you. And so what would we encourage you to do? Certainly go out and download the new version, KNIME 4.2 for Analytics Platform and 4.11 for the server. If you're interested in the details about the stuff that we've presented during this webinar, there's a What's New page out there you can check out. It's listed here. Don't forget about the KNIME Hub for, digging up workflows, posting your own workflows, trying to understand how nodes work. All of that information is up there on the KNIME Hub. And then we've got some new features that Cynthia had showed you before. We're always trying to add functionality to the hub as well. KNIME Forum is a great resource if you have questions about the software generally or about individual workflows. Come check us out on the forum. And then if you're a customer and you have questions, what's the best, upgrade path to the latest version of KNIME Server? What should we do to make that a seamless and painless process? Please reach out to our customer care team via this email here. Cynthia's on the customer care team, but we've got lots of other folks there as well to help with these types of inquiries just to make sure that the process goes smoothly for you.